When I think of this latest upheaval of the war in Ukraine, it's extremely moving to all of us. It touches us in a very deep place, especially because it's Ukraine. Every centimeter in Ukraine is drenched with Jewish blood. I don't know that there's a community in the world that suffered like the Ukrainian Jewish community. You may have heard of the pogroms of 1648, 1649, the Khmelnytsky pogroms, Gzeres Tach and Tat, when the Cossacks slaughtered, tortured in the most horrific ways, which I'm not going to describe, enormous amounts of Jews, men, women, and children, and in horrific ways. This is in the 17th century, and then again in the 18th century. The famous pogroms, again of the Cossacks, of 1768. There were the famous heinous pogroms of the 1880s, after the assassination of Alexander II, the Tsar, in 1881. Pogroms were unleashed on Ukrainian Jewry, which caused a mass immigration also to the United States, to England, to other places. And then there was, during the Civil War, after the Revolution of 1917, that claimed, some say 50, 100,000 lives. These are things that are not even known, how Ukrainian Jewry suffered poverty, savage subjugation, torture, bloodshed, violence, and death. And then came 1941. Even the most conservative numbers put the number of victims of Ukraine at 900,000. Some say it's more like 1.5, 1.6 million. Jews in almost every community of Ukraine shot. Literally, if you go out to every shtetl or every village outside of Ukraine, there's a grave there with thousands of Jewish holy bodies, men, women, children, old and young, shot by the Einsatzgruppen that came in after June 41 when Hitler invaded. Despite the fact before the Holocaust there were 2.5 million Jews living in Ukraine, and close to 1 million escaped. Many of them came back after the war. But under Stalin's communism, you couldn't practice as a Jew. You couldn't live as a Jew in the open. Tremendous anti-Semitism, tremendous hatred. And remember, the Ukrainians assisted the Nazis in the dirty work and the filthy work of slaughtering the Jews. And then communism falls, and a miracle of miracle happens. A resurrection of Ukrainian Jewry. If you want to understand the miracle of Jewish history, you go back to those places and you see the Tchias HaMesim. You know the prophecy of Ezekiel, where he discusses how he sees the dry bones and they have no hope, and God says the dry bones will come back to life. As I say to you, and I know many of them are friends and colleagues, 183, and this is the Chabad movement, and the other rabbis and leaders who have come and resurrected Judaism in all of the communities of Ukraine, affecting thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jews in one way or another, with schools and mikvahs and shuls and camps and social programs and senior citizen programs and programs for youth and for middle-aged people and for the elderly, men, women, and children, Jewish holidays and Shabbos. Simply incredibly inspiring to understand the secret of Netzach Yisrael, the eternity of Israel. So when you look at such a history, and remember something else, some of the greatest luminaries of the Jewish world came from Ukraine. The Baal Shem Tov, who changed the Jewish world, where did he come from? Ukraine. He was born there, raised there, lived there in Mezhebush, Ukraine. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, who changed the Jewish world in our generation, where was he born and raised? In Ukraine. Luminaries like Reb Nachum Chernobyl, like Reb Nachman of Breslov, one of the great spiritual masters of Judaism. Also Ukraine. His burial place is in Uman, which also experienced some heavy explosions in the last few days. As we pray for all of those communities in Ukraine. I think 3 of the prime ministers of Israel come from Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken. Moshe Sharet, Levi Eshkol, and Golda Meir. If you're familiar with Hebrew literature, you have Echad Ha'am, Shalom Aleichem, Avram Shalansky. You have Yiddish literature, Shalom Aleichem, Odessa. Ukraine pulsated with Jewish culture, with Jewish life in many, many different manifestations. So Ukraine is dear not just to Jews who live there or have relatives there or have friends there, but really it touches something at the core of the Jewish heart and Jewish history. And as I said, we are all one organism, we are all one body. Even if we sometimes deny it, or we don't feel it, or we don't see it, it's the real truth of our of our reality. And those Jews give us tremendous strength as we want to give them strength, thinking about them, praying for them, sending our love, our blessings, our prayers, and every possible thing we can do financially and spiritually to be able to uplift the morale and strengthen their spirit during these very, very excruciatingly challenging and difficult times.